My name is Lisa and this is Freedom Grows. In today's video, I will be lacto-fermenting 3 different batches of vegetables, and I will be walking you through the process and showing you how to do it if you're interested in fermenting your own vegetables at home. I also recently started a new blog, and I have a post all about today's video and it goes into a lot more detail. So if you're interested in that, I will link the website down in the description for you. Now, fermentation is a practice that has been used for thousands of years, as early as 6000 BC. It was a way for our ancestors to preserve their vegetables, their dairy, their grains. And today, some commonly known fermented foods are yogurts, kefirs, kombucha, sauerkraut, fermented vegetables, of course, kimchi, miso, and even soy sauce. Now, during the fermentation process, yeast and beneficial bacteria break down sugars and carbohydrates and turn them into acids and alcohols. And these natural preservatives give the foods that really nice, tangy, tart flavor that we like cheeses and yogurts, and of course, the vegetables. So I'll walk you through the process now and explain why I'm doing what I'm doing along the way.
The true magic of fermentation is that it's the only preservation method that actually makes your foods healthier instead of degrading their nutritional value. And that's because it creates additional nutrients in the fermentation process, like vitamins K2, B vitamins, loads of probiotics and antioxidants, and several more. They're absolutely wonderful for your gut health. And doing your own fermentations at home saves you money too, because truly fermented foods cost a lot at these specialty grocery stores. But if you do it yourself, it's a fraction of that cost, and it's also really rewarding. So what you see here is my lineup of ingredients and equipment. You're going to need clean jars with lids, organic vegetables, filtered or spring water, a kitchen scale, and non-iodized salt like kosher, sea salt, pickling salt, or Redmond real salt, which is what I use. Now, these veggies will be going through the lacto-fermentation process. The word lacto is short for lactobacillus, which is a type of good bacteria that lives on plants and crops. And this type of fermentation happens when the natural lactic acid bacteria break down sugars in the vegetables and convert them into lactic acid. And that process preserves the food and gives them that nice, tangy, zingy flavor from fermented foods. Now, before we cover how to ferment vegetables and why I'm doing what I'm doing, I do need to go over some important basics on salt concentration and simple math that you can do on a calculator. But salt is what's going to keep the bad bacteria away, and the amount that we need depends on what we're fermenting and the desired outcome. So the most straightforward way to calculate the salt concentration is to weigh the total amount of vegetables and water in grams, and then you're going to multiply that number by a certain percentage. So a higher salt concentration is needed for vegetables with higher water content, or those that have more delicate textures. So think of vegetables like peppers, cucumbers, and zucchini, which have higher water content. They will ideally need a salt concentration of about 3 to 4%. Now, vegetables like cabbage and onions typically only need about 2 to 2.5% salt concentration. So I'm going to show you my own example with these ferments here. So what you're going to do is you're going to place your jar without the lid on the kitchen scale, and you're going to select tare to zero out the weight, because you don't want to include the weight of the jar, only the vegetables and the water. So you're going to pack the jar with vegetables and leave about 1 to 1.5 inches of space at the top of the jar, because the vegetables will end up releasing their own juices during the fermentation process, and you don't want a huge spillover. So you're going to pour filtered water over the vegetables until they are completely submerged. And you're still trying to leave about 1 inch of space at the top of the jar, because you're going to be adding a fermentation weight on top. So again, you don't want spillovers. So Once you've packed your jar and you've added your water, you're going to take note of the total weight of veggies with water in grams. And you're going to try to round this up or down to the nearest 100. So I'm going to try to get as close to the nearest 100 as possible so that it can, make my calculation a little bit easier. So this is going to be calculated at a 3.5% because I have cucumbers in here in addition to the green onions and the garlic. So 3.5% of 800 is 28 grams of salt. So on the calculator, it would look like 800 times 0.035 to get my 3.5%. So I'm going to go ahead and add my 28 grams of salt to this jar. And then I will fasten the lid and shake for about a minute to dissolve the salt. And then I will be removing the lid and placing a fermentation weight on top of the vegetables. That weight is going to keep the vegetables submerged in the brine the whole time, so it prevents any chance of mold growth. Refasten the lid and set it aside for now. Now my last ferment will be spicy cucumbers with garlic. And it will be the same process as you just saw. So I'll let you watch what I'm doing while I talk about what to expect next. So once you're done with your ferment and you place it aside, you're going to want to keep it on a kitchen counter or inside of a cabinet or a pantry, away from direct sunlight. And the ideal temperature that you want your ferments to be sitting in is anywhere between 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 to 27 Celsius. Now, it's not a hard rule, but just keep in mind that the colder your room temperature, the slower it will ferment. If your room temperature is on the warmer side, it will ferment faster. Now, after 2 to 3 days, you're going to start to see bubbles forming inside of the jars. And once that happens, you are going to want to burp the jars once a day by unscrewing the lids to release the natural gases that are building up inside. And then you'll just refasten the lid. Now, you only have to burp the jars during the bubbly stage of the ferments. And that bubbly stage is usually the first week. After the first week, the gases slow down. Just keep an eye on them because, again, the colder the room temperature, the slower the fermentation. The hotter it is, the faster things speed up. Once the bubbles stop or slow down, you don't have to keep burping the jar daily. Now, you're going to leave the jars out to ferment anywhere from 7 to 30 days, give or take. You'll want to probably check the flavor after 7 days to see if it's to your liking. Just note that the longer you let it sit and ferment, the more beneficial bacteria it will contain. So I like to leave mine out for the 15 to 30 day range, just depending on what it is I'm fermenting. Properly fermented vegetables will automatically reach a pH level of 4.0 to 3.5. And within this range, the vegetables are tart and safe to eat, and they have a long shelf life. But if you prefer to be exact about monitoring the pH levels, you can do so with pH strips or a digital pH meter. And once your vegetables have reached the desired level of fermentation, then you'll want to transfer them over to the refrigerator so you can slow down that fermentation process and store them long term. And your ferment can last over a year if you properly store it, but you'll want to probably consume it within 3 to 6 months for the best flavor, texture, and of course the probiotic benefits. If you noticed in my video, I saved the root part of my green onions, and this is just a tip. If you're not already growing your own green onions, you should definitely do so, especially if you like the flavor. It's really easy. You can plant them outside, root side down, and eventually these little nubs turn into full-grown green onions that you can keep harvesting over and over. I've had these two for almost 2 years now, and I cut them close to the base and they just keep regrowing for me. So that's definitely something that you can consider if you like green onions as well. And finally, the last tip that I wanted to touch on are special fermentation lids that you can purchase for your ferments. The lids prevent oxygen from coming in, and they allow the carbon dioxide to escape. So you wouldn't have to burp your jars, which is really convenient, especially if you are doing a lot of ferments or larger batches of ferments. Now, this type of lid that you see here can be used for vegetables, but it's more commonly used for liquids like kombucha or wine. And in my case, I'm brewing my own fruit wine at home. So if you're interested in seeing the process and how you can easily do this at home yourself, let me know in the comments and I may make a video here in the near future.
If you liked this video on lacto-fermentation, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more content like this in the future. Thank you for being here until the end. I wish you well, and I will see you next time.